Welcome back to
Mhm.
Wired for Woo. My name is Deanna,
And I'm Angelique.
and we're two professional psychic mediums and dear friends who love to chit chat about all things life, love, woo woo, and everything in between. We know how wild this human ride can be, so we're here to share some of our experiences, insights, ponderings, and a bunch of laughs along the way to hopefully help you feel connected and supported as you walk your own unique path.
And thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy Wired for Woo, we deeply appreciate it. If you could like and subscribe to our podcast, your support helps us continue to share our stories, insights, and all the magic along the way. So we're so grateful to have you with us on this amazing journey.
Amazing.
Amazing.
So one of our favorite aspects of I think this whole wild spiritual ride has been our topic today, which is one of the most fun parts of it, and we're talking
Truly
tarot.
fun. I love
We're
tarot.
talking tarot.
Tarot.
I think this is such a fun topic because I think a lot of people's interest in their spiritual path or journey or gifts kind of is sometimes sparked by tarot or finding what I want to say is decks.
Yeah, they're very intriguing. I've always found them to be really cool.
Yeah.
Like how do you know all that just from like looking at a card? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
It's
find
pretty
because
cool.
I work at a spiritual store and I find a lot of people are like, I'm new to all of this and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I just really was curious about a deck. Like I wanted to see. So I feel like it's kind of like, I guess to call it like a gateway drug. It's one of
Yeah.
those things that kind of sucks people in initially, but it opens their eyes to, I think, like higher connection, but also intuition and also like to other spiritual concepts. But it does tend to be something that kind of like, I think sparks the curiosity, the interest, and feels a little more like play from
Yeah.
some of the other spiritual topics or methods.
And do you feel like if someone's asking you like what do I do? Do you tell them just whatever you're drawn to? Or there's also that thought of you have to be gifted a tarot deck. Have you ever heard that?
I hear it almost every day.
So
Um,
I think those are great things to talk about because I feel like when you're looking into getting a tarot deck or thinking about, learning them or wanting to use them or whatever, that starting point is kind of scary
yeah, and I
or
think
confusing
there's
or just like I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. La, 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 that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It can feel overwhelming. And I think that's why like most people start the conversation with like, I don't know anything yet and I'm brand new. And like the beauty of it is like enough right now to get you to whatever's meant for you right now. So like, I always just tell people who are like, but it has to be gifted or it's bad luck or whatever. I'm like,
I know
to me,
that's so silly.
I understand, like, I think we all have superstitions in our own ways, but I'm like, I've never been gifted a tarot deck. I've always bought my own. And I
Yeah.
think I always tell people, like, I think that our superstitions or those kinds of beliefs only have the power that we decide to give them. Or, like, and I hear the same thing about like being gifted like an evil eye bracelet or something. Like, an evil eye has to be gifted to you. It's not something you're allowed to buy for yourself. Versus, like, I go, like, I think but one of my highest like beliefs and values is like love and self attunement. So, like, if I know that I am feeling called towards this tarot deck or I feel called to get an evil eye bracelet, like, I'm showing up for myself to do it. But I do tell people, like, if you have a strong sense of belief around someone has to give you the tarot deck or bad things happen, you should probably just wait and get it from someone else because your energy
Yeah,
will
but
call in what you're afraid of. But I don't think
oh
that
yeah,
whether or not
I
you
could see that. I could
receive
see that. Yeah, yeah,
I don't,
yeah.
but I don't think whether or not you receive it from someone else is going to dictate if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think you just know when you're ready. And I think curiosity is the marker.
Yeah, but I feel like if you're feeling really drawn to it, like that's one of those things where it's so funny. I feel like I have my grandmother coming through right now, right? She's like, that's poppycock, because that's not a word I would ever use. It's a very dated word, but I just feel like, like if you want a deck, go get yourself a deck. Like do
Yeah.
it. Like don't listen to those the
Yeah.
hoo-has of superstitions. Like just trust your instincts and the vibe and really feel out like what works for you or what you feel you're most drawn to and trusting your gut there, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's kind of a mixed bag there.
It's a mixed bag because, like, I always want to grant, like, power to what I want to say is like the perspective that is currently someone's reality. You know
I
what I mean? Like
know.
if they're
This is
afraid,
gonna be, I
no, I
know, but
know.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
but that's why I always share with them. I think those things have the power we give them. And what I find is nine times out of 10, actually, I wouldn't even say nine. I would say I've never experienced where when I've kind of given it that way and been like, look, if your reality is that that's how it works, like then you should listen to that. But my belief is that there's no right or wrong time. It's more about when it's in alignment for you. And if you're feeling called, then it's calling you in, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
like I would say almost every time I've given it that way, they go, oh. And then they go and buy it for themselves because they realize like, oh, well, that's not what I want to hold for myself, is that I have to wait for someone else to give me permission to pursue something my soul is kind of calling me towards. But, and usually by the time they're asking that question, they're like already pretty like, I really want to, but they're usually just asking from curiosity of like, I've heard this. And I think tarot and like those, especially the superstition, like don't do this fear-based narratives around tarot
Yeah, that's so
are
true.
it's
Yeah.
very potent because a lot of us grow up in households that aren't okay with it. But it's also what I want to say is a lot of it's built from ignorance. Not, and I don't mean that in like a derogatory way, just like you don't know what you don't know. And like what does the human mind feel fear more than anything is the unknown. And then I think there's also the layer of like we live in an age of TikTok and Instagram and all of these people online that are giving their perspectives and the way that they interact with these things as the one and only reality of how these things work, versus again giving that granting authority to someone's perception around it. And I think that's actually what creates our lived experience, is the way that we're perceiving and interacting with and choosing our belief systems. So it's kind of, but like if your belief systems around tarot are really rough, like maybe wait until you feel at ease before you go and get your tarot.
Yeah,
But I
that
find,
sounds logical. But I also feel like it's like, you know what, go get a deck, try it. If it doesn't resonate with you, you know, I feel like I feel like, I've been given a couple of decks in my time as gifts,
hmm
and it's interesting because the decks that were given to me, I never use,
mm,
if that makes any sense.
hmm
And then the ones that I've been drawn to because I'm like, oh, it's so pretty. I have to have it. It's just beautiful illustrations or art, or I just really like the way the messages were. And those are the ones that I've used. So I feel like it's like you have to just you just have to try it on for size.
I
As
think,
I guess everybody's different. That's just that is my take on it as far
yeah.
as like because I have I have like three decks that people have given to me for either like holiday gifts or things like that. And I'm just like, some of them are still in the box. I just never, they just don't resonate with me energetically.
hmm
And so like the decks that I've used are the ones that I've handpicked myself. So
Yeah. I
I don't
think
know.
it's
I think
very
you got to
case
feel
by
it out.
case. I think it's
Yeah,
very
you
case
got to
by
feel it
case.
out. You got to feel it
Because
out.
I've always picked my own decks as well. And I am,
Yeah.
but I recently received a tarot deck from a friend that's one I've had my eye on for a while. So
Hmm.
when it found me through a friend, I was like, oh, maybe it's time for me to start working with it now. So I do feel excited about it, but it's like, what I want to say is I find that with all of my decks, there's a process of building relationship with it. So like I don't really lean in and trust it and work with it on like what I want to say is especially with other, I don't really use decks with other people anymore. But like if I was going to use it with other people, like I wait until I have an established relationship with it. So I
Yeah.
just got gifted the first deck that I'm actually kind of like, ooh, inclined to use, but that's the first time I've
Hmm.
been gifted a deck. But I've
Yeah.
also been the gifter of a deck that it's like I know I've told you the story, but like my cousin came over and she was just curious about all this stuff. And
Hmm.
like she saw this one deck I'd been working with for a couple of years and I really loved this deck. It was the Fountain Tarot. And it took me like a year to build a relationship with this deck because it was just very like abstract, but like
Yeah.
really deep. She picked it up and I swear to God, I saw her energy light up and I saw the deck like come alive. And it was so clear that I was supposed to give her that deck. And
Yeah.
like she started doing readings with it. And it like kind of, I don't, she would have to talk more about her experience. But like her being gifted that deck was, I think, from what she's told me, like a positive opening experience for her, and it did resonate with her because she never read tarot in her life. She would just pull a card and know what it meant. And so I was like, so there was also
That's
an intuitive
beautiful.
connection with her in this deck. And I was so in love with this deck, I literally cried, and I asked her if I could like say goodbye to it. But when I gave it to her, like you can ask, we sat on the floor in my room, and I was like, thank you so much. It's like because this deck got me through my divorce and through some like really hard times. So like, and you build like a love for your decks, but like it was so clear it was time to give it to her. So I've been on both ends of it. So I think it's just like a, but I would say for most people, I think you're going to be the best judge of what is calling you and what I want to say is it's everything from the art to the author of the deck to who's writing the guidebook, like everything about it is an energetic component. And so you're the one who's going to be the most attuned to what's going to resonate for your energy.
I think that's spot on. I feel like yeah, over the years I've flipped through different decks, and I know you and I have talked about that too, like the evolution of different decks in our life, like with where we are in our life,
Hmm.
and how some decks you outgrow.
Yeah, it's
Am I
sad.
jumping ahead
No,
in conversation?
no.
I feel like it's like we have our starter decks, when we're
Yes.
starting out.
Yes.
And then what was the first deck that you bought that like the one you was that the one you were talking about that got you through your divorce, and
No.
or was that your
That was
many
actually
many decks down the road deck?
yeah, that was actually several down the road. So, well, I think and I guess this is a
And
great
what deck was that? What deck was the one that you gifted? So if anybody was like, "Oh, I want to know what that
it
was,"
was called the Fountain Tarot.
the Fountain Tarot. Oh,
It
you
was
did
beautiful.
mention
And
that.
still to this day, I
Yeah,
have a
short-term
feeling.
memory. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Still to this day, I have a feeling that eventually I'm gonna buy that deck again because
Yeah.
it is so potent. Like there's some decks like I could go on about this forever, but there are some
Now, is it
decks.
tarot or
So
oracle?
that was a tarot.
Okay.
It's the
Okay.
Fountain Tarot.
And we'll talk about tarot versus oracle
Well,
in a minute.
so
Yeah.
so I can't talk about my first decks without talking about the fact that I started with Oracle.
No, that's
So
great.
Oracle decks, we get this question all the time in the store too. Like the big differentiator. So Oracle decks and tarot decks can be used for the same thing. You can ask it questions, it can provide clarity, perspective, give you an idea of what's going on, actions to take, all that good stuff. But it's just the structure of it is different. So Oracle decks are very free form. They can be in any order. Every single deck is different and can have anywhere from 1 to 500 cards. Like there's no limit on the number. The artwork is always different. There's usually a guidebook that's very in depth that gives you messages. And sometimes there's actually messages on the cards as well. But every Oracle deck is different. Whereas tarot typically follows a very similar structure of I think it's 72 cards total, with minor, major arcana, the four suits, and the court cards. So they're all going to kind of have like a similar structure to them, and a lot of the cards will have the same meaning across all tarot decks. So it's used the same, but just a much more complex structure and a little harder. You can't just like jump in and well, you can, but like what I want to say is you'll learn tarot more deeply over time versus oracle. I feel like you can just like jump in and give yourself readings as soon as you get the deck and be able to
That's
kind of
so
give yourself a
true.
comprehensive message, which I think is why oracle is great for building confidence, which is what my first deck did for me, which was my wild unknown animal oracle deck.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still have that deck. It's my most used deck. I still go back to it every time. I think that one is a lifelong. That is,
And
I
it's
don't,
so funny that you have that deck or you're talking about that deck because that was one of the decks that were gifted to me. And it does
it just
nothing
doesn't
for me.
resonate.
It does
Well,
nothing for me.
I've never
I
felt called to the
can't.
tarot though. I've never felt
Yeah.
called to the tarot that's by the same artist and has a lot of animal energy in it. It's
Yeah.
only the animal oracle deck.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful deck. I mean, it's gorgeous,
Yeah.
and I being an art girl, like anything that's like really cool like that. I mean, I would definitely say check it out if you're interested in that kind of deck. But for me, like it just never was like it was just, like sitting in a conversation with someone that you're like, okay, I'm kind of done here.
Well,
I'm
I think
kind
it's
of done here. Short conversations.
but this is where it's like you're attuned, like your attunement is going to change. Like you
Isn't
gravitate
that
more towards
crazy?
like angel decks and things like that,
Hmm.
where like I like that is not an energy I resonate with at all, but I'm a big animal girly. So like
I
to me,
know that
animal
makes so
medicine
much
makes
sense.
sense
Why you're drawn to that one. But
because it's
anyway,
like you speak that language. But so I started out with that one. And but then when I first started learning tarot, I learned with the Rider Waite deck, which is like that classic yellow box with the very bright cartoon imagery. That's kind of what people associate as like the basic classic tarot.
hmm
And I learned on that one. And then the Fountain Tarot was my next tarot deck after that. So, and again, it took me a good like I would say the Fountain Tarot for me was a complex deck to kind of go to after, because to me the Rider Waite had a very like kind of light, kind of airy, like all right, like I didn't take it too serious. But whereas my Fountain Tarot deck had this energy that was just so, the only way I can put it, and this might be a weird word to use, is like penetrating. Like
yeah,
it did not mince words. It was very clear. It was very like to very loving, but very stern. Like it didn't let me get away with anything. So like while
yeah,
I was going through my divorce, like it held beautiful space, but it was like what I want to say is like it's the death, the still to this day the tarot deck I've had that like told me the truth, like no sugarcoating. And I was able to read it that way, right? Versus some of the decks that I now use have a little bit of a different flavor to them. But again, I
yeah,
think we outgrow them as we're in different seasons. Like at that time, I needed a deck that wasn't going to allow me to be delusional. I needed
yeah,
a deck that was going to hold me to what truth was because that's what I needed to be able to move forward. But now it's
yeah,
like I'm able to kind of hold myself accountable so I don't need such a like like that penetrating energy is good, but like you know what I mean? It's like I just kind of need something to bounce off of, not something to show me
yeah.
necessarily. So I think it's a different phases of growth. Different artwork is going to resonate, different authors are going to resonate, different just different decks call you at different times.
I agree. I agree.
What did you start with?
I started off with, well, it's funny because when we were talking about gifted earlier, I was gifted a deck when I was in college. I used to bartend, and one of my regulars at the bar gifted me a goddess tarot deck.
Oh, funny.
And I just remember going, I don't get this. Like, as it was, it was just so confusing to me. I wasn't interested. I still have that deck today. I still have it. It's in my little box. But the one that, like, I want to say, once I want to say my awakening, after my awakening, or things started shifting for me, was John Holland's deck. And that's the Psychic Tarot Oracle deck. It's a blue box. You can't miss it. You can get it on Amazon. But and that one, I don't know what it was about that deck, but I mean, like you could see how much I used it by the edges were all like torn, like just
Mm-hmm.
like I just remember really, really simple, just the beautiful energy in that deck and just able to just really get the message across. And it just really worked for me at the beginning stages of I want to say my path and my journey, and then just evolved to I did the Rider Waite deck too,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think I used that deck to the same as you, where I it was my teaching deck. It was my teaching deck. Although that one didn't really resonate with me as much. Like I don't feel I didn't feel energetically connected. I felt like you, like that was my starter to learn tarot. But where I really, really learned tarot is the Light Seers deck, and that one I still use. That's my go-to. I have two decks of that. I have a small little tiny one that's like I can fit in the palm of my hand, that I use for myself. And then I have a deck that I use if I work events because I don't use them for my readings. And you don't use them for your readings anymore either, right? Unless you're doing an
Mm-hmm.
event or something.
Yeah, I'll bring a deck. And even then again, I usually opt more towards my animal deck just because it just talks so loud with me. But yeah, I'll bring like if I'm doing like a party where it's like, 4 hours, like you kind of, it's nice to have something that kind of helps, move the energy with you rather than you having to pull everything out. But I think that the tarot was actually one of the main places that between the tarot and oracle was where I really started to hone what I want to say is like I want to say there was a point at which I realized that the cards kind of became a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a bad way, but just where it's like I didn't need the cards. It was just like they were the like now it's like if I still see them as a tool for having developed intuition for sure.
Mhm.
Because I've noticed now, and I'm sure you've had the experience of like if you're in a reading and they want you to kind of talk about a certain energy, they might show you a tarot card or they might give you the energy of a tarot card and you know what it talks about. So you kind of are able to feel into like like if they were to give you like I've had it where they give me like the strength card in like in a visual rather than pulling it out. And so I'll know. So it's still like it's both a reference tool you can use, but it also builds your intuition because you're I think eventually most people start reading intuitively rather than just out of the book.
Yeah, and that's a good point between reading the cards and reading them intuitively.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like there are a lot of really brilliant tarot readers, and I'm sure you've had readings where you can tell someone is really kind of like they memorized the guidebook, and they know that card inside out, upside down, but you know that they're not really tapping into spirit. And well, I feel like they're all spirit led anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this like weird thing, but I can kind of tell when someone's really tapped in to their intuition and really listening to spirit. It's like deeper than the card. Like you're saying, it's a relationship
Mhm.
versus like I memorized the guidebook.
Yeah, and I think both can be really useful and helpful.
I know. I was
And
going to
I
say it's like
just
it's a tough call there because not everybody wants to be like, this channel for their cards. Some people just like, you
yeah.
know what? I just want to use it as like a little 411. Like, what do I need to know today?
Yeah, and some like I think everyone has a different relationship with it, like whether they're reading for others or reading for themselves.
Yeah.
So, like what I want to say is again, I started out as someone who, because you don't have a relationship with the cards, you're building your intuition, like where it was reading the cards and being like, well, how does that concept relate to that concept? And I think when I'm thinking of someone who's just reading the cards rather than tapping in, they're more in their head than in their emotion around something. Like they're more in the mind about the reading versus in the body about the reading. And to me that's where like the difference between like memory versus intuition kind of separates is like yeah, your brain can be telling you that card means that thing, but your intuition might go like, you know what's weird is I'm getting kind of a different feeling off of it today than I normally do, which is where I think it makes that intuitive shift. But I would also say like some people have a relationship with tarot where, and I think it's just based on someone's natural inclination of what feels helpful for them. So like some people like um use there was definitely a time where I just used kind of tarot as like almost like a journal prompt rather than a message from spirit where it's like oh like
Yeah.
what might help me to kind of like sit with today. And if I got like let's just say the tower, like
Hmm.
I might journal on where am I struggling to allow things to change, right? Or like what does that bring up in me? So it's more of like a self-reflective tool rather than a guidance tool. So I think it's also I think neither one's good or bad. I think they just offer different avenues and I still think you can get to like the same answer intuitively as you would if you were just being self-reflective. I think it's just a matter of someone's comfort level, their relationship to it, and their natural inclination. Because I could see where like I'm very woo, so I love to be in the intuitive, like I don't need to know, and I that helps me
Yeah.
versus someone who's very logical, like an engineer, might not really get a lot from working with the tarot in that way, but might get a lot as a like, this is basically like a journal prompt, like an abstract journal prompt that just gets me thinking about my situation different. So you can make it more logical and it can still help you.
I totally agree. And it's like it's kind of tricky because, when I'm saying it, it's like it's easy for me being a psychic medium to say I know when I'm sitting down with a tarot reader if they've memorized the book or they are really tapped in. But to your point, when you're giving readings for yourself for someone who is just curious or just wants to do little reads for themselves and ask that question like what do you tell me, what can you tell me about my situation right now, and you pulling a card or a couple of cards and you're just getting like I want to say the 101s out of that card. I
Hmm.
think that to your point, that's just as powerful. In whatever it is you need to get out of that card. I think that it's really kind of crazy because I think even for me, even before I really knew what I was doing, I guess you could say, I was like, this is crazy. How did it know? It's really weird.
Yeah.
It's kind of magical and beautiful, that the messages, how the messages come out of that. But I
Yeah.
love, like you were talking about the tower, because I know you and I were talking about the tower earlier. And, it's one of those things. I think people freak out when they see certain cards. And I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions
So
about
many.
certain cards in there. As a matter of fact, and I'm just going to giggle over this. Like whenever I work an event, specifically, like if I'm doing like a bachelorette party or something, like I always tell them, I'm like, I took the bad cards out. Like, and it's because the horrible thing is like, but I have to communicate to them that there are no bad cards.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And but like I know if I'm working an event and it's like really fun and light and energetic, like I'm gonna take out, like as soon as someone sees
Death.
the death card or the three of swords, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like there's some cards that just spiral people no matter how much you say, really it's just creating an awareness here for something, and you can always
Mhm.
see a beautiful side to anything, I think, or hope, or, because I think you and I read the same way. We're always solution oriented and, looking for like, how can we find our way around an obstacle, and I think that it is really funny, even for us, I'm sure, like when we get a tower or a card like that, we're like,
Oh, I go, oh shit.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I know. It's like, as much as I could say, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, there's a positive, in there,
Mm.
and it's like, okay, I'm just trying to shift my mindset here.
Yeah.
But it is hard to see those cards sometimes in a poll.
Yeah, it can be. And I think like usually by the time you're pulling the tower or death or whatever, you're already in it. So it's like, so I think, but I think
Like,
our
I
mind,
know my life is a
I
mess right now.
know, I know. I literally pulled the tower 2 days ago and I was like, of course. Like,
Yeah.
which there's a lot of foundational shifts going on in my life right now, and it's been a challenging season. So it's like, of course, like it made sense. But I think so
Well,
like,
explain the tower, first of all, for anybody who's listening who doesn't really know what the tower is.
yeah.
Because
So
I feel like we're talking about it, but I think it would be good to kind of let people know really what the tarot
what
card
the tower
is
is.
and how
Yeah.
you see it, and I can say whether how I feel, like, what my relationship with the tower is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess like the traditional imagery is like two figures jumping out of a tower that's being struck by lightning in a heavy storm with like dark black skies. And so it's a very like intense visual card. But it usually just means like, for me, it's like a quick and sudden shift creates foundational change in a way that's usually uncomfortable, feels abrupt, but it's for your good. So it's kind of like you've gotten maybe a little too stuck or complacent up in your like high tower, and it's kind of
Hmm.
like but the foundation that tower or that belief or that system or that whatever's changing in your life, whatever foundation it was created on wasn't stable. So the tower has to come down to be rebuilt on a more authentic foundation. So I guess just for some context, like I lost a dog 2 months ago, and he was very dear to me. He was 13, and I had him his whole life. So in his death, like not only did I see my ex-husband for the first time in 4 years, and like have a major like conversation and healing with him, had a major shift with a good friendship of mine, lots of clarity around my own voice versus other people's, a lot of like individuation. There's all of these awakening moments that are core changes in my sense of self and in my
Tower
belief,
moments.
power moments in,
Tower
but they're
moments.
they're foundationally changing my
Yeah.
relationship to myself,
Hmm.
particularly my inner relationship to my emotions, and if I will show up for myself. So, and what I want to say is, in while it's been uncomfortable, like what I want to say is I've seen some true colors coming out around some certain things, or I'm seeing some things really clearly in my life that aren't comfy to look at. However, they will produce foundational permanent change in how I relate, expectations. I get my ability to see the truth of things. So while the tower is not fun, it's like, I don't see it as a bad card, because at the same time, that clarity, that truth, and that authenticity is the new foundation through which what I create next will be built on. So I'm shedding a layer of illusion in order to build something that's actually more true to me. And I feel like this is what I'm gonna say is usually tower moments are a little more like, I think you can tell me if you think I'm wrong. They're usually hitting multiple levels of your life at the same time, and they're usually like an internal shift for me. And it comes through like losing a job or through, maybe like a change in a friendship. And tower moments can also be positive. Like you just got a promotion, but now things are like really chaotic because you're having to learn a bunch of new stuff. Like, but it's a moment of like inner refinement is kind of how I see it, but through discomfort.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I look at it as like, yeah. When I see the tower, whenever I see the tower, it's like, oh God, the tower. It has like a couple of meanings for me. Definitely change, and I usually what's been coming through a lot lately when it's been popping up, and especially like at events and things like that. It's like what wasn't working before needs to change. Like you
Mm.
can't keep jumping on the hamster wheel and expect the same results.
Hmm.
And I feel like, you can't create change without creating change. And I feel like for me, like that seems to be um, I want to say the pattern of messages that come through often for that, and not in a bad way. To your point, it's like, yeah, you could see it and it's like scary, but because it's a to your point, there's like people jumping out and fire and it's like, oh my gosh, but it really is about just really looking at like what needs to shift in your life. And I agree, it's usually like it's not just one thing, it's a
Mm-mm.
couple, it's multifaceted. um but sometimes it is. And I have had it come through where if it was someone started something new,
Hmm.
and it's almost like you have to create a stronger foundation, or I want to say also too, like you have to allow for the dust to settle
Yeah.
too. So it just, again, it just depends on what the question is you're asking,
Hmm.
around it, or sitting with it in that moment of like, all right, what's not working right
Yeah.
now that has to shift. It's a big change card, but it's really
Yeah.
not that scary. I mean, it's like, to me, I kind of do an eye roll more than I'm like, you
Yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah. I'll go
so than
shit because
anything
I'm
else.
just like, you, of course, you want to see like the Empress or like,
I know.
the Four
The
of Wands
star.
or the Star
Send
or
me the
something.
star.
Yeah. Or like, oh, look at Ten of Cups. Like, that's
I
what
know.
you'd rather see. But I think
Yeah.
that, and one thing I think that's worth mentioning is like, I think sometimes, like, what I want to say is because we're human beings and we like to be compartmentalized, I
Hmm.
think we forget that, like, just like life, like all of these tarot cards exist on a very wide spectrum. So it's like the tower, like just because it's like the tower card or the death card, I think the death card is a great one to use for this. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean it's extreme where it's like death, your death. You know what I mean? Now,
Hmm.
but I think the death card represents the energetics of the death process. So, like, what I want to say is to me, winter season is the death process. Like
Hmm.
winter season is the death and decay of matter that needs to go into the soil to produce better crops for the following year.
Hmm.
But like that, so that's a positive thing. Like that's just part of a life cycle. And like death could be, that death card could represent anything on the spectrum from like, yes, an actual death and how hard that would be. And like, oh, like you cut out sugar. Like it can be anything on
Yeah.
this
It's
very
the end.
wide
It's the ending of
spectrum.
a cycle.
Well,
It's the ending of a cycle. And I
but
mean,
that
that's
could
how
be
I always look
any
at it. Yeah. It could be any
it could be
topic.
anything. So it's just
Yeah.
because a card is coming up, but every card in the tarot has that broad of a spectrum of life events it could apply to. And I think we tend to go worst case scenario extremes, but in reality, most of the time that they're playing out, it's somewhere in the middle, right? It's kind of somewhere in that like everyday life space. It's not usually in the high highs or low lows. It's usually kind of in the middle with the occasional high high low
Now,
low.
now let me ask you that. Let me ask you this, Deanna. When
Query me
you're
this.
when you're pulling cards for yourself or for another person, like, let's say you got the death card or the tarot card and you pull, I mean, I don't know how many you pull for yourself. I always pull five because five is just my magic number.
Mm,
And I always look at every card because some people read left to right, past, present, future. You know what I mean? If they pull three cards, you
yeah,
know, or or they'll do, there's like also like,
they have their own spreads.
yeah, there's spreads and everything, but everybody has their own way of reading tarot. Like to me, like I do tarot the way I do my psychic reads. I look at it as situational,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of like I always pull five cards unless for some I got a jumper, and we could talk about jumpers. And then it's like, oh, sometimes it's six or whatever, or sometimes it's only three. But when I'm pulling for myself or even for reads at an event, I always pull five because I'm like, tell me about the situation right now, and then I pull more cards, you know what I mean, to
Mm,
get the all right, well, where do we go from here?
yeah, like what are the options?
Yeah. So like if I'm getting the tower in there, like say I'm
Hmm.
getting like a whole bunch, I think everybody is so different here. I mean, I guess how just share with me how you do, like if I was sitting down with you right now, how would you pull cards for me?
It is different for every reading. So,
Or do you just allow the jumpers to come out? Because sometimes I do that too.
yeah, I always allow, I only do jumpers. Like I
Yeah.
only do when they fall out on their own. And
And
I guess I
explain a
just,
jumper. Explain a jumper,
oh,
because I don't think people
it's just
they
when you're
fly out of the
shuffling.
deck.
Yeah,
A card
exactly.
flies out of the deck, and
Yeah.
I always so for me, like a jumper is like you're shuffling the deck and cards fly out. Like those are really meant for you. They're like, it's like almost like the deck is screaming, like this
Yeah.
has to be seen. This has
Yeah.
to be seen, right?
I definitely take into account how they come out of the deck for
Yeah.
how important, or like what I want to say is like if something flies across the room from this person, I'm kind of like sometimes I might feel like, oh, there's like an avoidance energy with this concept, whatever
Oh
this is,
yeah, 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 yeah.
or it's like this one really wanted to be seen or make a show, or this is like one. So it's dependent. Again, I think it's hard to say like, oh, this is how I do it because it's each one, like every time a card flies out based on what I felt when it flew out and how it behaved, I intuitively read that as part of the message of that card. So it's different for every single one. And I tend to do my spreads by like, I just shuffle until whatever comes out or flips over
Okay,
as I'm
but what if
shuffling.
none flips out of the deck?
They do
This is just, I mean, every single time,
every time.
every time you have jumpers, because there's times
Mhm.
where like I've worked with a client and I've had no jumpers and I'm like, all right, I just need you to pull a bunch of cards. And that's another thing about, do you let people touch your deck? There's an energy thing there too.
So
I'm sorry, I'm
you're
throwing a lot of stuff at you. And
um
then, and
and
then,
then what about this? And what about this? And what about
Mhm.
this? Um So, I mean, I just kind of like if nothing's coming out, I just keep shuffling. And because and I know we both do this, but like I channel primarily, I don't really
Yeah.
use cards. If I'm using cards, it's just usually to move energy or because that person is very visual or I've had people specifically request the cards because they don't trust a reading if they don't have cards involved. And I tell them it's the same reading for me whether I'm using cards or not. But
Yeah.
so sometimes I'll just like as I'm shuffling, I'll just be getting information. So I'll just talk and give what I'm getting as I'm shuffling. And then eventually something does come out. I've never had a reading where it's like nothing came out. I might have to
Oh, see,
shuffle.
I
I
have.
might have
Well,
to
I think
shuffle for a minute.
if I'm doing mini reads, like I'm doing an event and I've got like 20 people.
Oh,
I mean that's not going to be, probably a lot of the people that are listening today are going to be out there doing like mini reads, or maybe they are, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, I got 5 minutes to convey a message and four of them I'm shuffling because the cards are flying. Yeah. Because I
yeah.
do the same as you. Like I wait for the jumpers. Like when I do read for myself or even at events, like I wait for the jumpers,
Hmm.
but there's times where I'm like, okay, like I want to make sure that I'm getting, and I allow them to touch my deck, but I do clear the deck after.
Oh,
And I
see,
feel like,
I'm not super weird about that. Like
okay,
I don't know. But again, I anything that's like anything that's coming from for me personally, anything that's coming from a like if they are in my space, they'll fuck with this. Like to me, that feels very, I feel like it, to me, it has an energy of like, um, almost like victimhood when I'm thinking about being in that space of like, if they touch my cards, they won't work right. And I'm like, why? Like, so it's in, because I want to say, like, we walk through Publix and our auras touch people, and we walk through, you know what I mean? I don't think we're meant to keep our energies. I think there's such a focus on keeping our energies separate because during the healing process, you have to kind of separate into your own space. But I feel like I've never been weird about someone touching my cards. And if anything, I'll just go like, if like, especially if someone's like, I'm really curious about them and I see them get excited, I'm like, take a look because I love to share. And I've always felt like my guides, but then again, that could just be like my personality is to share and to be like, look, like, if I love something, like I want you to look at it and I'm fine with someone touching it. But for
Yeah, I'm
readings,
all
it
about the
just,
clearing of the energy, and maybe that's an empath thing. But like, and I
which
know
like
everybody
I'm
has
empathic too. I
rituals,
think
and
everyone just has different belief systems and needs around
do
it.
people put them out in the moonlight with their
Yeah, some
crystals?
people.
You know what I mean? To clear their deck. I mean, I feel like it's not a matter of like, I don't, I love when people pull their own cards, you know, but I always right after, I just like, especially if I'm doing multiple reads, I like to clear the energy of the deck for the next person. So
Mhm.
their energy is not on the deck, if that makes any
Influencing.
sense. And it's really just, and for anybody listening that's like wants to do this, I mean, again, to your preference, you don't feel like you need to do that for your deck. For me, I'm like, I
Mhm.
tap it like with my own energy to clear it. It's just like a little thing. I'm
Yeah.
like, just tap clear. Like I
Yeah.
do a little pump pump like on the top of the deck. And then it's nothing like I have to spray it with sage or anything.
No.
You know what I mean? It's just a little tap, but it is something that I know tarot readers do. Like
Oh,
I,
lots
you know,
do.
or they'll put crystals on top of their decks, you know, to keep their tarot deck energetically like in alignment, I guess. Or everybody has their rituals, and we were talking about
Yeah.
rituals earlier, and I think that's another one of them
Yeah.
for
And again,
sure.
I think it falls under like whatever someone feels is right for them is going to produce the energetic result that is right for them.
Yeah, that's true.
To me, I don't feel inclined towards that, so I don't.
Yeah.
But someone who does feel inclined towards that, listen. Like
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
there's a right or wrong. I think it's more about like our belief around what rituals we need produce the energetic effect. So like the fact that I have never like that I'm like, no, I think it like it regenerates, it's fine. Like spirit's got it. So like I kind
Yeah.
of put it in like I don't, again, for me that belief system, that structure does it causes doubt for me rather than openness. So
Oh, I gotcha. I
I
gotcha.
don't go that way. But for other people, do having that practice is what creates openness and releases doubt. So they should do that. But I
Yeah.
think it's just very specific to each person.
And I fall in that bucket.
Yeah, we're all
I,
different. We're
I fall
supposed
in
to be.
that. I definitely fall in that bucket. It's like, you know, crystals in your bra,
Yeah.
so yeah, I definitely I get weird with my deck.
No, we all have our
But
different
I
rituals
know
there.
we do have all our different rituals. And I think too, I love that you said like a relationship, you know, like having a relationship with your cards, because I feel like there's some cards in my deck that have like a very personal meaning to me, that are outside of like the descriptives.
Hmm.
You know, there's an energy there that really resonates with me on some cards differently,
Yeah.
just because like I've worked with them so much, at events and things like that.
Yeah.
But
And I think that's where when you start saying I don't have to listen to the book, it's about what I feel is true for this card.
mhm,
Like just know if you're reading for yourself or someone else, like if that's your definition for it and it comes out, it's because that's the definition that you need to give that person. It's not like, well, this is mine, but I should give them the book one. It's like if that's what's coming out for you, that's your symbol for that energy, which means that's the energy that's coming forward. Like we're the vessel, we're the filter. So it's kind of like even if you're pulling tarot cards, it's like if something means something to you specifically, like that's the energy that needed to be conveyed, not what some book on a shelf says is supposed to mean. But I think
mhm.
that's to your point, like where we deviate from book knowledge to intuitive reading.
Yeah.
That's where that shift happens is when you're willing to let the definitions change based on how you feel rather than rather than keeping to a book. But I think that's where it gets tricky because then I think if you're not really like good at feeling when you're trying to make something happen or you're trying to make a card read a certain way because we're uncomfortable with what it might be showing us, that's like again there's some self-discernment there around like I definitely like I'm the queen of like I'll pull if I'm like pulling a card and I'm not trusting it, right? And then I'm like, but what
Like,
does
pull
that
another
mean?
card. I need
Yes,
to pull
what
another card.
yes, I call it clarification syndrome. Like it's like you just are like, okay, but what does that mean? But what does that mean? But what does that mean? You just keep pulling more cards because you're not sitting with it or you're just not clear right now or you're not really open to hearing what those cards are asking you to look at. So that's where like, that's a definitely one of the pitfalls of reading tarot. And I would say almost every pitfall I can think of for tarot comes from being in a fear space around what the truth is and maybe in a place where we're not quite ready or open to what I want to say
That's
is look
so
at it from a
true.
different perspective.
That is so true. I don't think anyone who's ever bought a tarot deck for themselves has not going, I don't like that. I don't like that answer. Give me another card.
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, that's not good. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, all right, well, there's got to be another outcome here because this is not okay. And then we keep flipping through till we get
yeah,
what we want to see,
yeah,
instead of sitting with the fact that, okay, this is really a message that's meant to cause us to reflect or kind of sit in the moment, or as I always say, like hit that pause button a little bit, and just
Mhm.
think it through versus, okay, I'm gonna just keep flipping till I find the card that I really love and like, yeah, that feels better. Thank you, Star, for coming in.
Yeah.
I
Well,
needed to
and
see that. I needed hope. I needed hope. It's like, yes, we all want hope, but there's moments too where it's like, okay, like, girl, you need to get your shit together. Like, and
yeah,
this is your card to tell you, you need to get your shit together and be okay with the fact that, yeah, I need to sit with this
yeah.
versus going, I'm looking for someone that's going to allow me to brush it under the rug and not deal.
That's the thing is tarot's never going to help you if you're looking to avoid.
I know it's so
And
true.
And also, I think there's something to be said for like, in the same way we'll talk about like how we go into readings, like if the other person's not open, there's only so far we can go. And
Hmm.
sometimes, like, I've just the other person's like saying, like, okay, give me a reading, but they don't actually want to, they're afraid of what could happen or how deep we might go, or if all, you know what I mean? They're not actually giving me energetic permission
Hmm.
because there's fear and doubt blocking those channels. It's the same thing with our tarot. Like I always say, like tarot is just a tool to mirror you back to you. Like it's in
Yes.
spirit can use it to give you a message, but they're still only reflecting you back to you. So like I always tell people I teach a tarot class and like I start every class with reminding if you're feeling scared, emotionally heightened, afraid of an outcome, or like you need to control something, wait. Do not consult your tarot deck at that time because it will only reflect your fear, your need for control, and your doubt back to you. So, and that's usually where I find then I'll be like, but what does that mean? But what does that mean? And I probably already asked the original question when I wasn't neutral enough to be willing to hear. And so, like, if I'm not willing to hear, it's just going to reflect the busyness of my mind and the busyness of my emotional self in that moment.
Okay, I have an alternate to that. That makes so much sense to me, but I'm also wondering, a lot of times we go to our tarot deck because we're feeling fear and we're feeling uncertain and at a crossroads. Like, is there a way, like, to approach it then, saying, setting the intention before pulling a card, saying, listen, I am in this space right now. I am in fear. I am in this. I am in that. I'm in that. And I'd love to pull a card to guide me or give me clarity to get me out of this space.
I think it depends on someone's relationship to the space they're in.
Yeah,
So, like, I think
that's very true.
like
That's
there's
very
when you're
true.
saying like I'm still open to I'm recognizing when you're in recognition of I'm in a space, right? There's still a
There's
moment
a
of
difference. There's
there's
a
still a
difference.
moment of
Yeah.
sitting with self and grounding into where you are
Hmm.
versus I think if you're consulting it because you want to get out of where you are,
Yes.
those are going to have very different energies because what you just said is I'm setting the intention of I'm recognizing the fear and I'm open to seeing something else. And what I want to
Instead
say
of
is,
going right in and going, oh my God, I'm so afraid and I got to pull a
yes.
card.
And like we're like, oh my God, are they cheating? Are they doing all this? When you're in
Yeah.
that space, it's only going to reflect your worst fears because you are energetically vibrating at your worst fear. So it can only reflect, like it's almost like you're pushing out a really strong fear vibration. And so it's so like that's the only thing you're really, it's like when we get in a headspin about something bad is happening and we build that whole story around what must be going on, and it's
Hmm.
like our brain literally can't pull in a different scenario for a
And we've
minute.
all been there. We've
We've
all
all
been there.
spiraled.
We've all spiraled
but
100%.
but the
And
tarot is
I
going to
think,
reflect the spiral, not the truth, because we're not in a place where we can receive the truth yet.
and I think that is a really good piece of wisdom for someone who's listening when you're going into the deck, like really pay attention to where your emotions are, and if you can, then maybe like sit in this pause space before you pull a card,
Hmm.
or hit that pause button before you pull a card, versus going into that space of fear. Because you're right, it will
Yeah.
only reflect it 100%.
Yeah.
If you
And
want
I
to get if you want to get a true message from, whether it's you want to look at it as I'm receiving a message from the cards through like my higher self, my guides, my angels, whatever,
hmm
I would divine source, God, however you want to view it. I would definitely say really think about that then, right?
yeah.
Before you pull a card, because you're absolutely right. How many times we pull cards because we're in mass hysteria about a situation,
And it
and
doesn't
then
bring us any
it's like
clarity
it doesn't bring us any clarity, or it's confusing as hell.
because you're confused.
It's like this makes no sense
It
whatsoever.
will reflect your own
Yeah.
confusion back to you
Yes,
and not provide
yes,
clarity, because
yes.
the
It's
point of tarot is
crazy.
not to solve our life for us. The point of tarot
No, no, no.
is it's not supposed to tell us what to do. It's not supposed to be our decision maker. It's not supposed to be the authority in our lives. It's meant to be a tool to bounce our current perception off of other possibilities like a mirror,
Hmm.
to show us where we can use our personal agency to create change, perspective shifts, and choices. It's never going to, like, again, if you're coming confused and going, tell me what to do, it's going to reflect your confusion, because the point is for us to go, oh, I'm feeling really confused. And in the clarity of I'm feeling confused, we're able to take care of ourselves in a way that may not solve all of the confusion right away, but can certainly settle a busy mind through meditation or
Yeah.
a few deep breaths or something like that. So it is clarity. It's just not in the way I think we're taught to use a lot of spiritual tools, as we kind of give our power away to it. And I think we forget we're here to be sovereign beings, and you are the ultimate, you have free will. So, like, tarot can show you where you're at and can give you another perspective with the help of your guides. But just like your guides aren't going to step in and choose for you, like the tarot isn't going to do that either. And so I find like again, there's still clarity in, oh, I'm confused. But tarot's meant to help you understand your inner environment so that you can create conscious choice, not to tell you what to do.
Yeah. And I think to your point, what's really beautiful about that too, and also anyone who's doing tarot, is the same energy as if you were getting a psychic reading. It is the energy today.
Hmm.
Same thing, because we have free will and things can evolve and shift and change, and you could take back roads and side roads and, different roads on your journey, or however. Um, the tarot is like, this is where you are today.
Hmm. Yeah.
Even if you're looking at it as like future, it's a future. If you did past, present, future, if you pulled three cards or whatever, people do that. It's really going, this is your future today. Like, I know, does that make sense? Is
It's
that
it
how would you interpret it? As like,
yeah.
this is like, it can be I want to say a nudge, or like, yeah, if you're in this alignment and
Hmm.
you can, I said, I think the tarot does offer a lot of hope. It can,
Hmm.
which I think is lovely.
Yeah.
um you know um but that's, I mean, we could talk, and I know we want to make sure that we we're getting in at the end of our time here, so I don't want to. I feel like I want to dive deeper in this. So this could be like a 3-part series
I could.
on like future telling with tarot, but because I think there is some element of possibility and probability in there, but it's energetically for me anyway. I want to say it's in the alignment of hope or possibility.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like again, from where you're currently standing, what I would almost frame it as like what with your current perspective, or if it's offering a shift, with that shift, what possibilities are you opening the door to?
Yes.
Kind of thing. So it's kind of like what could happen based on those shifts, or like what I kind of see it as like most likely
Yeah.
energy. But I really don't. I'll be honest, I find more and more I do like know looking at the future, because like all I hear from guides all the time is like present. Be in the
Yeah.
present, be in the present, be in the present. So I've actually stopped going like likely outcomes, because I find it doesn't help people, because then like our brains want to go to like what's going to happen next, rather than being with where we are. And where being with where we are is where all the healing is. It's where all of the motion is. It's where all of the action is. It's where all of the clarity is. So it's like everything you're actually coming to that reading for is available only in the present moment, not by looking at what's coming. And to your point, the only time I do see it come through is where spirit wants to bring a little hope of like, if someone's really going through it, of like, this is not the end of the road. Like
Hmm.
there are good days coming, like, or there are a lot of pathways available to you. So I have seen them give like, oh, I see like 3 pathways opening, where they might in the immediate future be offered like some kind of choice or something like that, where they're just kind of prepping them for like, start thinking about what you want. But it's very rare that they kind of want
Yeah,
to
it's
future
tricky.
focus, because
It's
I think it's very rarely helpful.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like it's like I don't know, anytime like I've done like tarot or something, I get a lot of yes and no questions. So I think, you know, I think anybody who's getting a tarot reading or go into sometimes tarot readings, they're wanting to know, will this happen?
Mm,
Or, I get a lot like, how many, like, will I have children or will I get this job? And they want very hard yes or no answers,
yeah.
which are very future centric or like very, they're not
Hmm.
in the present,
Yeah.
So I feel like, there's the beautiful thing about tarot is there's cards that signify yeses and nos, that are definitely leaning more towards one or the other. But I want to say to the way that you were phrasing it, you're absolutely right in staying in the present and saying, okay, these all feel very positive. These feel like towards a positive outcome,
Hmm.
and I feel like it is starting in the now and making that right turn. You know what I mean? Towards whatever it is their yes or no question
Yeah.
is looking for.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like like sometimes with them, it just depends on the questions and how you're addressing it and things like that too. But
Yeah.
I know we talked about this earlier, and I know we need to wrap up because
Here we go.
we are chatty, 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 chatty. Um, you know, and we had started off talking about like how we read, and we're both very like spirit works with us with the cards in a very present tense,
Hmm.
and like here's where you are today, and then again the unfolding of that.
I
But
always
I
go for
love,
like advice or clarity for how they're being asked to interact with the
yeah.
present. That's
And
kind of,
I love that because I feel like it's like I feel like there's so much more out of it. And the interesting thing is even in psychic reads, like I could tell someone, "Oh, you're going to meet someone." Like if someone's interested in like, "Am I going to meet somebody?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, that door feels open for you." Like I could easily say, "Oh, you're going to meet someone in October." Or like
hmm,
this is signifying to me that this card is more on the seasonal side and it feels fall time or blah 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 blah. And they're like, it didn't happen or whatever. And it's like, this is the energy today. and
Yeah.
anything can shift and change in the next 6 months. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's with psychic reading, tarot readings. It's just knowing that when you go into reading your cards, know that it's reading the energy today and where you are now, and that things can shift and change, right?
Yep.
Or kind of along those lines.
Yeah, which
Um,
again is like I would say if you're doing future stuff, like just oh, I want to
See,
say is
I love the future
it's
stuff.
keeping it very light.
Yeah.
Very,
Oh,
very light and
I
not
do
putting a
too.
lot of weight on it.
Yeah.
And just like, yeah. Yeah, because I can't tell you how many times things have shifted and changed. But what always helps
For
me
all of
is,
us, anybody, whether you're getting a reading or you're giving a reading or doing one for yourself, I feel like there's so many times where like, oh, this didn't come to fruition. It's like, well, a lot of times we may not be in alignment with whatever that is that we're looking for at that
Mhm.
time. It doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. But yeah, it's interesting twists and turns with
Which
everything.
again,
But anyway,
everyone's got to decide their own relationship with it and how far down that road you want to go.
yes. Yeah,
For
see,
sure.
I love the future telling. I'm very honest, and when I see if I'm doing a card read, and I only do card reads for events, like I know we talked about, but like I love giving somebody hope in
Yeah.
that sense of the future tense, or future reads, but I'm also very clear in saying. I'm not going to say, this is going to happen to you. Like, I'm not that kind of reader.
Yeah.
And I know neither are you. It's like I work in possibility and probability. Like, I feel things very energetically. It's like, oh, this feels this feels much more grounded here or whatever in a card or whatever. And, um,
Hmm.
but, but, but yeah, it's fun. It's
Yeah.
fun and cool. And it's a cool thing to play with for sure.
Yeah.
Anybody that's getting into tarot cards, they're just a blast. I think they're a blast. They're a fun
They
tool.
are. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, okay. Well, I think we got to kind of start moving on, but we
Dun,
wanted to
dun.
end our tarot segment with a quick card pull from a tarot deck, and see if, we'll do a little collective card pull and see what card maybe has a message for the collective today. So we'll just pull from there. I'm using the Way Home Tarot, which is an indie tarot deck by Everyday Magic. I've been using this deck for probably about easily 5 years now.
Oh, it's the first time I'm
Um,
knowing about this deck, so I'm excited. I
oh,
think
really?
no. I think you've sent me pictures of it when
I
you
have
got
to
this
have.
deck.
I think you were
Yeah,
still living in
that
Florida when I got this deck, so I
okay. I was
immediately
gonna
sprayed,
say
oh, we got a
this is
flyer.
the kind of friendship we have. We like I bought a new deck, and you have to see how beautiful it is.
We got the
Okay,
Eight of Cups.
the Eight of Cups.
Eight of Cups. So, Eight of Cups, for me,
That's a beautiful card.
which what I want to say is this is very much the energy that I think we've all been kind of in for the past like probably
Yes,
5 weeks or so at least.
so
All of those
true.
retrogrades were between the retrogrades and the eclipse, we just had the eclipse season and then the full moon, like very shedding of things that aren't working anymore. And the word that I just heard as I was picking this up is like it's letting go of everything that feels hollow. So anything that doesn't have depth, anything that's not really like adding to your life, particularly cups are like things that aren't emotionally satiating anymore. So anything that's emotionally draining or just like because like on the card I have is an octopus and it's like with a bunch of like broken styrofoam cups and stuff washed up on a beach. So it's kind of like all of, oh my God, I can't get my camera right. It's like all of the things like octopus love to like squeeze inside of stuff. And so like it wouldn't be very satisfying for this octopus to try and squeeze into a broken styrofoam cup because it wouldn't have like the qualities it needs to have that more full body joyful experience. But usually the Eight of Cups does mean like there's several aspects of life that we're kind of leaving behind that we were once very emotionally invested in order to make room for cups that are actually full of what we want to be drinking, and kind of saying like I might have put a lot of time and energy into these, but they're just not yielding the emotional satisfaction I wanted. And so I'm gonna be willing to release those and leave. And what I want to say is usually I'm kind of getting like that feeling of empty space that we have to hold sometimes when we leave behind something that's no longer emotionally satisfying. It's not going to be filled with something emotionally satisfying like right away. But when we're able to hold the like, I'm not going to just fill this with anything, I'm waiting for the thing that it really feels the way I want it to feel. Um, to come in. And then my guides are showing me right after that comes the Nine of Cups, which is where there's emotional contentment. And we're going, look at this that I've gathered. Like it's a man at a feast, like with all of these cups on a table behind him, going like and feeling very contented. So what I want to, and then there's the Ten of Cups, which is like, I have everything and I feel so emotionally fulfilled. But what I
It's a
want to say is
journey.
there's been a lot of like shedding and leaving behind energy
Oh
lately.
my gosh,
So
for sure.
but the Eight of Cups also comes with the promise of when you are willing to release what's not adding to your life emotionally, you stand to gain something, maybe not what I want to say is as much material. Like what I want to say is like he's got 8 cups, but even if he gets 2 cups that are like really satisfying, that's still going to feel twice as good as 8 cups that are empty.
Yeah.
That's
Did you
how
want?
I'm interpreting it.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I, I wanted to leave it open if you wanted to add anything to that
You
card
know,
pull.
I feel like it's like for me with Eight of Cups, I feel like it's one of those things where it's you're kind of walking away from, you know, it's like I'm kind of done with this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like ready to move on.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the energy that I always feel with the Eight of Cups. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting this behind me now. It's like an acknowledgement of something going on, and then I'm just like, I'm just, I want to say, I'm just done.
Yeah.
It's that finite, like, ugh, yeah, no, like, but I feel like it's also, it's, I always see this card to me as very full of stepping into your power in the sense of I kind of been through a lot and I'm ready to take that next step into this almost like walking into the sun, you
Yeah.
know. Um
There's definitely a lightness to it. Like you're walking into something a
yeah.
lot lighter. You've been carrying
Yeah.
8 broken cups and now you get to put
Yes,
them all down.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'm so done with this. That's how I always feel that card. I'm like I'm so done with this, and I'm like I'm out of here. That's
You know,
like that's the way I feel when I see the Eight of Cups. I'm like I am so out of here. Like
I
this.
just I just heard emotional decluttering. So
Yeah.
it's like, do I really
Yes.
like this? Do I really wear that? Do I really want
Yeah.
to? And it's kind of like whenever we clean out our closet and we kind of go like, I'm not bringing anything else in this closet unless I really, really, really love it.
Yeah.
So it's like
Your
making room for
Your
quality.
Marie Quan how do you what's her name?
Condo, Marie
Marie
Kondo,
Kondo. You're Marie Kondoing your life.
but
You know,
emotionally, because
and
it's a cups card.
that's your Eight of Cups. That's that one.
Cups.
I
I
love
love
that.
that.
I love that. So fun.
So good. That's a great message. I love that. All right. Well, that's tarot. Woo.
Woohoo.
We were really looking forward to doing that topic. So
Oh my gosh,
that was a
yeah.
fun one.
I feel like we could talk another 2 hours, but we're going to behave.
We could, and we just might at some point. But
I know.
today,
I
I'm proud
know.
of us. We're
So
on
fun.
time and we're doing good.
Ish. Ish. We're a little over. We're a little over, but
Listen,
that's okay.
growth, growth.
All
So,
right.
you know what time it is?
Titty bit.
It's
Go ahead.
time for a little nipple of knowledge. It's titty bits.
Uh, every time.
Every
Every
time.
time.
I
Every
love it.
time.
It never gets old to me.
Hmm.
It never
Hmm.
gets old. But today's topic is actually really fun.
Oh my gosh, I love this topic.
And the
Yeah.
aim is to keep these short, sweet, and like kind of just like gee whiz for you so you can kind of like start playing with these, whatever we offer in these right away. And today we're talking dream interpretation, just
Woohoo.
some of like our basic how when we have dreams, like things we pay attention to, or how we might start to decipher what a dream might be kind of working out for us. So how do you view like dream time, Angelique?
Well, it's interesting because I've been dream journaling since I was younger. Like I have buckets of journals on dreams. So dream to me is very personal. Like I have the books on the Encyclopedia of Dreams, and you can Google dream meanings all day long.
Hmm.
So I want to say it's very personal. So for me, it's like I have certain symbols that like when they show up in my dreams, and I'm a very lucid dreamer. Um, and very vivid dreamer enough that like I said I journal, but I have certain symbols like and I've shared this one with you before, like whenever an alligator shows up in my dream, I lived in Florida by you for 20 years almost. So
Mhm.
alligators are, you can't go anywhere without seeing an alligator pretty much. And they've always just scared me to death, So whenever I have fear or something that's fearful in my life, an alligator shows up in my dream. And there was one time I remember journaling and there's like three alligators in my dream. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's something really going on with me that in my world that I'm trying to work through fear on,
Mm,
because I had three alligators in my dream.
yeah.
So,
A friend, I know he's going to listen to this probably, but one of my good friends has been having a bunch of like wolves in his dreams.
oh, very
And which
protective.
I know very, but like there's so much there. So
Oh my gosh,
I know
there's so
you're
much you can
listening. I hope it's
unpack.
okay. I
You can
mentioned it. I
you
won't
can
name you.
unpack that all day long. I
No,
I love wolves
and we
though. They're
do. Yeah.
so beautiful.
So
Depends on how they show up in your dream.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's one of the, so we're going to go through a couple different things to pay attention to in your
Yeah.
dreams and how you might kind of, what I want to say is I think the primary way I would decipher any of these things we're about to talk about, there are two things that I think create the context for the dream, and that's like how you feel throughout the dream.
That's huge.
So
Huge,
like
huge, huge.
what
Yeah.
emotional state is present through the dream and your association with certain symbols, people, like what concepts you associate with whatever these things are. So again, to me, alligators are not fear, but to Angelique, they are. So like to me, like alligators might be like primal, to me, they're dinosaurs. They're just like
Yeah.
dinosaurs incarnate. So and they're about waiting and observation for me. So like if I see alligators, I know like, oh, I'm like waiting or I'm observing for the right time. I'm in stillness. Versus like if Angelique sees them, that's her indicator of like a fear. So again, these are very specific to you.
To your point, and I think that's really important. You really have to like reflect back of like, how was I feeling in the dream when I saw that alligator? For me, whenever I always saw them in my dream, I was in panic mode.
Yes.
And so that is a key ingredient to analyzing your dreams, is really tapping into the emotions of how you were feeling when you see these symbols.
Yes,
So
but
yeah,
also I would say like if someone's like really afraid of spiders, but then they see a spider in a dream and they felt really at peace and were surprised that they felt so at peace,
which is really
that
kind of
might
cool.
that
Yeah.
might be like an indicator that you're dealing with something that is a fear symbol for you in a calm and balanced way. So just because like so again, I think there's like I would separate like how you felt in the dream for what you associate with that symbol because I think they create context together.
Oh yeah, if I was super calm and like, walked past an alligator and didn't even flinch an eye, I was just like, "Oh, look at that. It's really cool." I know that would be a different experience, or I'd be in a
Yes.
different state. Absolutely.
Yes.
You're 100% right. But I would say most of the time when alligators show up in my dreams, I usually, I
Yes.
have that panic, but to your point, I think that's like a really important also side note, or like, put in journal notes of like, okay, like I was actually really chill
Hmm.
during that. So like this is kind of great,
Yeah.
you know?
So then I guess on that note, like I would pay attention to me anytime animals show up in my dreams, highly symbolic. But also, again, I'm
Hmm.
an animal girly, but I think for all of us, anytime there's a specific nature symbol, I pay attention. Or what I want to say is like an animated being, I think are always important. So like, or like people, whether you recognize them or not, especially though, if you recognize them and you know who they are, I think
Visitation.
yeah, well, if
Well,
it's
if they
if someone's
passed,
passed
if
on,
they
it can be
passed,
a
yeah.
visitation or
Yes.
what they represented to you. So again,
Yeah.
that's where you can tell, you'll know the difference between like, no, I really felt like this was an interaction on a different plane of consciousness. Like I've had somewhere I'm like, that was clearly me visiting with someone that was real versus like I've had dreams where I've been like, no, that person was in this dream with me
Hmm.
versus when you're like, it's them, but it felt a little different. It's like who they represent. So they can be placeholders too for different parts of your experience that you're kind of like working out, I think. But that's why I'm
Yeah.
like paying attention. Like anytime you see animals, people that you know, or like any other kind of like major player. Sometimes like this, I've had like dreams about like Tom Cruise and stuff, like where it's like, but what does he represent to me? So it's about asking
Yeah.
like, what does that animal, person, or player in my dream.
Modes of transportation are another really big one.
Yes.
Boats, buses,
Planes.
planes,
Yes.
cars. Cars are huge.
Roads,
Roads,
paths.
bridges.
Hmm.
I can't tell you how many bridge dreams I've had where the bridge was like completely broken down and I've had to go around it or like had to
Hmm.
swim through the water. And then that's symbolic too. Water is emotions and so yeah, there's a whole bunch of little things there.
Yeah. And I think the big question for that is kind of and then the other thing I would say is like your environment. Like
Yes.
I've had whole dreams that have happened in like broken down apocalyptic cityscapes. And
Mm-hmm.
like I actually apocalyptic dreams are very common for me. But usually but it's my interaction with it that is usually like it's like most usually I'm an observer of an apocalypse, or I like see the apocalypse and go like, yeah, I've got 10 minutes. Like and like I'm used so like
Yeah.
but to me it's like it's that environment is telling me about what I'm observing within myself, or sometimes how I'm just processing what I'm observing outside of me. But so I would say people, animals, major players, any kind of modes of transportation, environment, any type of movement, like whether we're running, if we're walking, if we like again, and then take that information and ask yourself, first of all, what do I associate? What are my personal associations with those themes, environments, people, animals, whatever? And what was the relationship to how I felt about them in the dream? And I
Yeah.
feel like that's a really good marker for kind of picking out some of the main themes in your dreams and how you might be feeling about them in your subconscious.
Yeah, I think 100%. And like I want to say as you're researching meanings of dreams, if you don't know what any of it means, I mean, yes, tap into all of those things and you're like, oh, I'm just curious of like, what does this symbolize mean? If you're Googling or you're chat GPTing it or however, looking for it, only take the thing that I've learned is only take the parts like, yeah, that makes sense to me versus taking the whole definition and going, oh my gosh, there's all this information on I'm going to use the alligator and all of its different meanings. Like you have it different for me. But like if there's just one word in the definition that really hits home for you, like that's what you're meant to take away, right?
Lean
We
in,
could
yeah.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All good points though that you made.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and that's just kind of a good starting point for kind of being like, oh, I wonder maybe what's going on under the surface that my brain, or, and I think it's a mix of like subconscious exploration, sometimes premonition, sometimes, I find guides talk to me and like are kind of telling
Yeah,
me
me
what's
too.
going on internally or like preparing me for kind of what's shifting internally. So I think it's a mixed bag of like, sometimes it's just our brain processing our emotional stuff that we're not quite aware of. So it's a mixed bag, but again, just trust yourself to kind of feel the difference. And I think that some of these little things to kind of, again, if you can figure out what your relationship to what's showing up in your dreams are, those major factors, and then paying attention to your emotional relationship to them in the dream, it gives you a really good like starting point for kind of figuring out what you might be kind of working through.
Yeah, I always kept a journal by my bed, just even if, like if it's the middle of the night. And then as technology advanced, because I'm an old lady, I would use my iPhone and just do voice recording,
Hmm.
and just say, I had a dream about da 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 da, and then I'll assess it in the morning.
Yeah.
But I want to say also, too, most dreams that are like really meant for you, the ones that you remember are really meant for you to like, I feel like it's, either your guides or your higher self, like really wanting you to evaluate something that's going on that needs to bubble to the surface, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I never try
Yeah.
too hard to remember. Like definitely dream journaling helps your brain to
Yeah.
flag like we're remembering.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say like if you can't remember certain details, it's okay. That's why like I focus so
Yeah.
much
I
more
feel like
on
it's not meant to
well, and that's why I focus so
or
much
ready.
more on the emotional experience because I
Yeah.
think your how you feel emotionally in the dream is usually the number one thing that you're being asked to be aware
100%.
of. Because
100%.
everything else is symbolic, but what really matters is like we're getting insight to how we're feeling. And I
Yeah.
think that's really the gift of a dream, is to kind of be more aware of our inner processes. So yeah, I would say for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just some cool little nuggets.
Yeah, well, you mean nipples,
Nipple.
nipples of knowledge. But that was Titty Bits,
Yeah.
and that's our episode.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for
Yeah.
tuning in.
Yep. And we will catch you on the next one. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.